Notes are out of order. That wouldn't be good. Start in the middle. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Hang on. I'm likely to trip over this for sure. So, Happy New Year. This is our first Sunday in January 2024. Okay, so who else besides me is like in denial that it's 2024, right? Some of us a little bit. So I got thinking about this message. I wanted to start with some little humor. I'm going to move to the side. So Eric's has some, I looked up some New Year's resolution cartoons. And because we all have kind of this love-hate relationship with New Year's and New Year's resolutions. Most people I know. Some people really love them, some people really hate them, but in general, our culture has this love-hate relationship. So this is, what exactly is a New Year's resolution? It's a to-do list for the first week of January, okay? Or, secondly, people be like, I'm going to start working out this year. Who's saying that? Yep, that nose got a little longer. That's usually mine. Some of you got to be in the right generation for this one. Dr. Evil, quote, quote, good luck with your New Year's resolutions. I got one more. Mr. Grumpy Cat, happy new whatever, just don't screw it up. So anyways, that's my little humor to start. I really wanted to talk about New Year's and kind of looking forward. I think New Year's resolutions get a bad rap. I think that in our heart, most of us sort of like think about it because it's just that time of year. And I was talking to Juliana before the service, and we were talking a little bit about like the rhythm of the church. And I thought, New Year's kind of does that for us. It presents a rhythm for us every year, whether you're in the church or not. It's not a church rhythm, but it's a rhythm of our lives, because every year we all celebrate in our own way New Year's Eve 2023, but most everybody will kind of either look back and they'll say, well, I'm glad that's behind me, or they'll say, it was a good year. I hope 2024 it will be a great year too, or I hope 2024 will be, much better than 2023. Whether we admit that or not, whether we think about it a lot or a little bit, I think that we always think about some things that maybe we'd like to be a little different in our lives. And there's a good reason for that. It's because we're hopeful people. We have a desire to see things better than yesterday, better than the year before. We have a desire to think, this next year I'm going to be in physically better shape, right? Or I'm going to have better relationships with friends or with my family. I'm going to work towards that. Or maybe, I'm going to read more this year because I want, to be mentally more engaged. There's all sorts of things that we can say about New Year's resolutions and what they cause us to think about, but they go back to this innate desire that we all have to be just a little bit different, to be a little bit better, to mean a little bit more, to be a little bit more satisfied. I was thinking about all the New Year's resolutions, that some of them that were insinuated about whether I'm going to eat less, I'm going to exercise more, so we're physically better, spend more time with family, friends. I think I mentioned that. How about travel more, save more money, make more money? somehow or anything. And then there's this whole relationship with God. Where are we at spiritually in our spiritual walk? It's like, what do I want to change in that area? And I think it's really good and healthy to think about these things. I think it's good to spend some time. And I hope what I hope to accomplish is to give you some tools that will help you think about what 2024 is going to look like for you. I'm going to start with prayer. All right, Lord, we thank you for being here. We thank you for seeing us all into the new year. And wherever we're at today, Lord, I pray that you would speak to your people. And if there's something they need to hear, Lord, open their ears so that they would hear it. Amen. So last week, Angie spoke on reflecting on 2023. How has God come to you last year? If you weren't here and didn't get to hear her in person, that is on podcast, I believe, and you can go to podcasts and look that up and listen to that. And she mentioned about all the ways that God had come to her in 2023. Great message. Thank you, Angie. So it seemed natural for me to talk about these 2 weeks that Pastors Jamie and Heidi are gone. It seemed natural if she was going to talk about reflecting on 2023, I should talk about looking forward into 2024. And I realize, we're all coming a little bit from different places depending on how we maybe look back into 2023. So if 2023 was a year of hardships, a year of suffering, a year of disappointment, you're probably feeling like, I am really glad to see that get behind me. And I have this hope that I can look forward into something that's more joyful, more wonderful, more with maybe peaceful, maybe more change, maybe more adventure in my life. There could be lots of things that you might be looking forward to. You may already have some plans for 2024. Some of you have vacations maybe already planned, or your things about, I'm going to plan to do this or that. And Angie asked the question, how did God come to you last year? And I'm going to say, how does God come to us in the future? How is he coming to us this year? So Matthew 28, just to be clear, tells us that God is always with us. And so even that question, I know, that coming to us, it's about how God's presence works in our lives on a day-to-day basis. We're not saying that God isn't always with us, because God promised in Matthew 28 he would always be with us to the end of the age. So he's here right now. We understand that. But there are times in our lives where God comes to us and it's more tangible. And I think probably most of you understand what I'm saying. It's more tangible, more heartfelt, more. It's when you sit there and you say, wow, I just heard God speak to me. and that. So in Hebrews 11:8, the author writes, by faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. I just kind of wanted to start there, because I thought that passage really said what I hope to impart a little bit, that the designer of our life is God. The builder is God in our lives. But in this passage, by faith, Abraham looked forward to seeing that foundation built. Okay? He was expectant of it. And sometimes, Well, I mean, I do this. Sometimes I'm just moving from day 1 to day 2, and that's all I can do. And that's okay. But there is a bigger picture of our lives of what's going on that God is building, He's constructing, He's doing things all around us all the time. And a lot of times we don't notice it, we don't see it. Sometimes we can have our heads buried in the sand and we don't see it. But Abraham, by faith, believed it, that God was the designer and he was going to participate in that. This is the same faith and hope that we have in a big picture realm. God has given us promises, and we look forward someday to an inheritance. Our inheritance is our eternal salvation. Someday. It's not today. Hopefully it's not today for any of us. But if it is, that's where our faith should be, is in our hope that we're going to live with God forever. So we look forward, just like Abraham did, to the promises that we have in God. And we have promises throughout Scripture that are given to us, but we also have individual promises, how God speaks to us in the moment. So about a month ago, when I first talked to Angie about what she was going to speak on, and it seemed, I kind of explained this, it seemed kind of a natural thing. Well, you talk about last year, I'll talk about the new year. And in that week, after I kind of made that decision, there were 2 other scriptures that really came to mind for me, and that as I'm wont to do when I'm preparing and I know I'm going to be speaking, I just try to hear what God's saying in that moment. I'm not perfect in that, okay? There's no perfection here, but I try to hear, what is it that you're wanting to say, God? And there were a couple of things that really imparted on my heart. I had these 2 scriptures, and so over the last week or so, I started, those things just sort of simmer for a while for me. That's how it works. They just kind of simmer in my heart. I don't write anything down. I just kind of, I'm going to bed at night, and I'm kind of thinking about those things and what it means. So I want to start with the first of those 2 scriptures. I'm going to read the 2 scriptures, and then I want to go into what I hope is maybe a practical adaptation for people. It's always good to have something practical, so I'm hoping that it'll be practical. So the first scripture is Hebrews 12, 1 and 2, and should be on. I'm going to move out of the way just a little bit, so if you want to read it, it's up on the screen. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So I have to add this because whenever you start a verse with therefore, you need to kind of know what the therefore refers to. And in this context, it's chapter 11, where the author of Hebrews is expounding on the great cloud of witnesses. Because this verse starts out, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. So I'm going to read off the names of the people that are listed in chapter 11, the therefore. And a lot of you will know, there might be some names you don't recognize, both men and women in this list. Cloud of witnesses, Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Joseph, Moses, Rahab, Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel. They're all listed in chapter 11. I encourage you to go back and read that chapter. It's very encouraging. These are the founders of our faith in a lot of ways, and we look to them, and they also had to lay aside, as the verse indicates, their own burdens and their sins to run a race and to endure, to have endurance, keeping their eyes on a promise of the future of one who would sit at the right hand of God. These are all people who lived prior to the time of Jesus. They're all found in the Old Testament. So they didn't know Jesus by name, but they had a promise that was given to them that came down through the Israelites. But we live in the New Testament time, so we look to Jesus. And but these are men and women. If you don't know about some of them, and I'm sure some of them you've heard from, these were not perfect people. There were prostitutes in this list. There were murderers in this list. There was all sorts of sin that is easy to see. And if you're wanting to get to know some of the founders of the faith, just take that list and read the stories about each of them, the struggles they had, the things that they dealt with in their lives. We're not really any different than people were 1,000 years ago and 2,000 years ago. The second scripture also has an athletic type theme to it. It comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. That's written by Paul, who also could be in that list of a person who persecuted Jesus, persecuted his followers, and the Lord showed himself to Paul. And so this is Paul writing about run hard. And if I'm not an athlete, okay? I mean, I did some athletic stuff when I was younger and everything, but I'm in my 60s now. I'm not really an athlete and everything, but I do know something about athletes. I know they train hard. I love to watch the Olympics. I know they have to have endurance. I know that they spend a great amount of time getting to the place where they're running for the gold, running for the grand prize there. So discipline and endurance often mark their lives. They have to have enough endurance to keep training day after day after day after day, and to be all that they want to be. And these verses, anyways, they came to mind because I think sometimes we forget that this is what our lives look like. Our lives are like a race. This is what Paul is saying in this passage, that we need to endure. We need to be disciplined. We need to strive in some way. Now, I'm not a works person, so I'm not saying that if we do all the right things, we're somehow going to arrive at this place. But there is part of us, inside of us, that want to live well. And I believe that God has put that in our lives, to live well. I'm gonna, let me see what I'm doing on time here. I think I'm okay. Yeah, okay. So I decided to read this. I wasn't gonna read this, but there's this poem called The Dash. How many of you have heard of that? Have you guys heard the poem? Oh, not very many. Okay, so this is good probably that I'm going to read it. It's not a very long poem, but I thought in some ways it kind of epitomizes the idea that I'm trying to work here with about what do our lives mean and why is that important at this time of year. Okay, The Dash. It was written by Linda Ellis. It says, I'm going to blow it up a little bit. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke the following date with tears, but But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that they spent alive on earth, and now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left. They can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real, and always try to understand the way other people feel, and be less quick to anger and show appreciation more, and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read, with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? Somebody gave me that book. It came in a little book years ago, and I've kept it on my bookshelf. And I hadn't read it for a while, but it kind of occurred to me actually just this morning that if you hadn't heard it before, you might be blessed by hearing it. Because I think that it touches a place in most of us where, yes, we want to live well. We want to be more than what we feel like we are today. And the thing is the dash doesn't just happen. I guess it could. I mean, we could live our lives and just go from day to day and not really pay attention to how we're living. And or we have things that happen that cause us to not be able to see what's really going on in our lives. But if you think about how you want to be remembered, there's probably things that come to mind that you would like to see. So there were 3 things that I'm going to share. I'm going to get into some practical application, I hope, that for me have helped me to focus and not get quite as sidetracked, to let me think about what's important to me. We're all different, so what I have is not the same as what you have. My hope is to just share a couple of tools that might help you think through the process of what is in that dash right now. You don't have the end date. All you have is the dash is going on right now in your life. So, first of all, there's no perfection. I want to be clear. There's no perfection in these things. Our lives are not perfected in any way. We are sinful creatures. That's why we rely on Jesus. We have to rely on Jesus. And so there's no perfection. They're just more like what I think of as soft reminders, like something you can go back to and say, how am I doing on that? I want to grow in this area. How am I doing on that? First of all, I have to give some credit because none of this is stuff that I created, but some of you might be familiar with some of it, and others, some of this might be new. But I picked out 3 things. There's other things too that have really affected my life, but I picked out 3 things. The first 2 are Stephen Covey habits for highly effective people. And I looked up last night, I said, when did he write that book? So he came out with a book. He's actually had written several books. He's deceased now. His dash is over. But he wrote, the first book he wrote was 7 Habits for Highly Effective People. And it was used a great amount in businesses and in not necessarily for personal lives. It was really created to be used in how businesses are run and how everybody has their own duty and chore and type of thing within a business, and how to be more effective within business. He also wrote, I think he wrote a book called Tyranny of the Urgent, which I'm going to talk about a little bit as well. But the first 2 actually come out of the 7 habits. Great habits. Not all necessarily pertinent, but if you adapt some of them to your personal life, I found for me, it helps me keep that focus, to keep that mindset going. So the first one is begin with the end in mind. Okay? Begin with the end in mind. So they say that you're never going to hit a target unless you take aim. That you need to aim at something to hit at anything. And I would just advocate, again, going back to this idea of just trying to promote God's presence in my life and in the areas of my life. I'd like to go back to, well, I sure would like to aim at something. Now, I might not hit a target. In fact, I've had a lot of targets that I've tried to aim for, and I haven't hit. I haven't succeeded in what I thought was my goal. But I want to say that it's not so much about the target sometimes, because life is going to happen in between the aiming and hitting the target. But I believe that the key is aiming, to think about these things. Take aim at something that you would like to see happen. One of the reasons that we often, I think, don't share New Year's resolutions is because we don't want to admit that we failed. We don't want to admit, like, we're the guy, the first week I was going really good. I went on that diet, and then, I don't know, I had a bad day, and, I ate a whole package of cookies. What can I say? We don't want to share that because we feel shameful about it. I mean, that's the honesty of it. We kind of feel ashamed. So we kind of hold our New Year's resolutions softly. We might have them up here, but we don't want to say, well, this year I'm going to lose 20 pounds, because if we fail, then we have to admit it, right? We have to admit that we failed. And I don't think we really like to admit failure. It's okay to admit failure, but I don't think we really like to do it. But it causes me, this keeping the end in mind, causes me to think about 4 areas of my life. Where I'm at physically, where I'm at emotionally, where I'm at mentally, how I think, and where I am at spiritually. Now, I'm not saying that's all inclusive, and you guys might have your own things, but for me, those are the 4 major things. I have a physical body I need to keep taking care of. For most of you already know, I'm having surgery this week. I'm getting a new hip because my hip went south on me, and I needed to take care of it, and I'm going to do it. Emotionally, it's just, how am I doing, like, in my relationships, in my loves, in my passions? How are those things? Am I having a lot of ups and downs emotionally? Am I stable? Am I allowing God to come to me in those places? How am I doing mentally? Am I still a learner? I'd like to be a lifelong learner. That would be one of my goals. Am I still doing that? And how am I learning? In that, and what kinds of things do I want to learn? My youngest daughter, Becca, here sitting in the front row, she's helped me this last year to learn how to do some burn painting, and that's kind of like, for me, it's a mental thing, and she's very crafty, and I'm not so much, but I like crafts, and it's one of those things that can stimulate for me, and so she's come alongside me and helped me do that, and that's a goal. It's been a goal of mine to learn how to do that. I'd like to create some things. And then spiritually is such a big realm. And it causes me to ask questions like, where do I want my prayer life to be? Where's the end result of where I want my prayer life? What would I like to have happen in my prayer life? How much Bible reading do I need to be doing? And at what point? Where do I need to be? And there might be all sorts of questions. How am I doing loving people? How am I doing? Do I need to be evangelizing more? Do I need to be? Any questions that relate to spirituality. I'm not saying that those are all questions I ask all the time. I'm just saying that there are possibilities of questions that you might ask about, where is my life with God? Where is my light with God? Do I feel rushed? Do I feel His presence? Do I feel His love for me? There's just all sorts of questions that can be asked. But I can't tell you what your end in mind is. Yeah, but I have to make that decision for myself. I want to have a target to aim at. And so I have to look ahead enough to see where I want to go. So the second thing, I referred to tyranny of the urgent. I'm going to draw you a little picture here. I brought the board out. This actually, amazingly, this is also a Stephen Covey habit. And, which I find was just like, it really kind of cut to the quick about a lot of things in my life, okay? And some of you may know this. This is a quadrant. This is quad 1, 2, 3. I'll step out of the way in a second. And above this one, not urgent. I'll explain this in a second. Let me get it up here. So this is a real practical way when you start thinking about your time, okay? So this is called like, I don't know, they call it the 4 quadrants or whatever they call it. But it was devised, again, for business, really, by Stephen Covey, about knowing what you needed to do, what you should be doing, what you should be delegating, and what you should be deleting from your life. That's what it was used for. It's not quite so works that way on a personal level, but you have 4 quads in your life. You have things that are urgent, and you have things that are not urgent. We all have them, okay? We have things that are urgent, we have things that are not urgent. We also have things that are important, and we have things that are not important, okay? And everything that in our life could be in one of these 4 categories. So let me explain each one. The one here, box 1, urgent and important. These are the crises in our lives, okay? My daughter fell off the bike. She broke her arm. I got to go to the hospital. That is urgent and it's important. You need to do that, okay? The pipes broke on the house and my house is flooding. That is urgent. It's also very important because you don't want to get your house flooded, right? These are often like emergencies, crises, that type of thing. You don't want to live there. Let me tell you, that's a very stressful life if you live in that quad. You go from one emergency to another, okay? The second quad are things that are not urgent, but they're important. So things that are never urgent, but really important are time with God, time with family, time with friends. They're things that planning, you want to get things done. You want to have certain things. Planning can go in here. Trying to think what else I put in there. But mostly I'm thinking, for me, I think a lot about relationships here. My relationship with God, family, and friends. And wanting to be in that area. But planning is also a big thing in quad 2. Stephen Covey would say, this is the place that you want to spend the most amount of your time in quad 2. Because they're things that are really important, but they're never urgent. So if you don't plan them, they don't happen. It means that you're over here or here or here. Okay. Quad 3, things that are urgent but not important. The solicitor at the door that you really don't want to talk to. The phone ringing from, the phone ringing could be somebody it could be important, but a lot of times it's not that important. But it interrupts something. So interruptions often are urgent. It's somebody else's crisis coming to you. Can be not important to you, but it becomes urgent. They're knocking down your door, help me, becomes urgent. This is the area that Stephen Covey in business would say that's the stuff you try to delegate out to other people because it's not important to you. This isn't a group thing either. This is an individual thing. This is something that you decide what's important and not important to you and what's urgent and not urgent. I'm not deciding it for you. I'm just talking about the kinds of things that are in these groups often. And number 4 is not important, not urgent. Okay? Playing video games, usually not too important, not urgent. Social media, it's usually not too important, and it's certainly not urgent. But they're often considered in this group time wasters, things that you take a lot of time with, but they're not really important and they're not really urgent. So this has been life-changing just to understand this for me, because I sometimes will be caught in a situation in my life and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm down here, I'm doing something that is not even important, but I feel like it's urgent and I don't want to be there. How do I change that? Here's the other thing I want to say about these. First of all, I wanted to say about in quad 2, the things that you don't plan usually don't happen. And I was thinking about, like, for example, that if I have a daughter and son-in-law and 2 grandkids that live with us, and my mother-in-law lives with us and stuff, and we take turns cooking. So if I want a menu plan, I need to plan. I need to talk to Tyler. He's the other main cook in the house. What are you cooking this week? What am I cooking? What do I need at the grocery store? And then if I plan that out well, I'm not saying I always do this, so don't misunderstand me. But if I plan it out well, I make one trip to the grocery store, I get what I need, and I'm good for the week because I've planned well. And I've spent most of my time up here. And it's important. We need to eat, and it's a planning thing. However, if I don't plan well, then what happens is I get home and I want to cook something, I don't have an item, and I'm like, oh, I got to run to the store. I might be over here doing that, wasting time having to run to the store for another item. If I'm really in trouble, I might have to go to the store 2 or 3 times and not be successful. Or I have to change my menu plan, which can kind of screw things up as well. So there's certain things that I found can be in all 4 of these at different times. And my example of that is, okay, so chores, I think, sometimes can operate in all 4 of these, and this is how it works. So if Jan's out of underwear, all of a sudden it becomes very urgent and important. He needs some laundry done, okay? I'm better off if I plan to do my laundry on a regular basis, keep his underwear stocked up so he's not like, I don't have any underwear, right? So it's better over here. But over here, it's where I might say, well, you need to do your own laundry because it's urgent for you, but it's not so urgent for me, and you need to get it done yourself. Not that he would do that, but he would in a pinch. He would in a pinch. I try to stay up here and stuff so he doesn't have to be, down here going, oh, I don't know what to do. And then this is where I'm like, I got to go to the store and buy him some underwear because I didn't get the laundry done on time, and he's in this place and whatever. So there's different ways that you can use it and see. But the goal is basically to kind of stay as much time as you can. You will spend time in all 3 things, and there are things that you do that can be restful that you might say, well, is reading a book a time waster? Is being on social media a time waster? Not necessarily. You might have to ask yourself, well, how much time is okay for it not to be a time waster? You might have to ask yourself that. All right, I'm trying to stay on task here. All right, I think I'm okay. So I got one more thing for you, okay? And Kathy, would you do me a favor? Maybe Kathy and Janice. Would you pass these out? So just to bring it a little more to home, this one other tool, Jamie and Heidi, I don't know if this is from somewhere or what. We're going to put it on the big screen. This is called the Rule of Life. This is the other thing that has been life-changing for me. And as much as I look at this, it's hard to be real specific. This has been wonderful for me to have in my life, to know when my life feels really out of balance, what might be going wrong. But the Rule of Life for me is totally been something that I like to review every year, and sometimes more often, because it allows me to speak directly about things. Something I'm writing down that target is what I need to help promote me. So I don't know. I'm not sure whether Jamie designed this or whether he got it from another source. Do you know, Casey? Okay. So anyways, it's a great resource. A lot of you maybe have already seen it, but if you haven't, hopefully it could be life-changing for you as well. So the idea of this is that we have, again, it's kind of a quad system, 4 different areas here of things that are important, okay? These are all things that are important to us, okay? We have, he says, prayer, turning my attention to God, but we're talking about the spiritual life there. Relationships should be important to us. If they're not, you got to go back to why they're not important to you. But our kingdom of heaven, of God, is built around relationships. Relationships with your family, relationships, they may be good, they may be not so good, but our lives are built around the relationships we have. People who do not have relationships, who isolate themselves, do not do very well. They don't do well mentally. They don't do well emotionally. They die younger. There's all sorts of things that can be. So I encourage you, if you're here today and you feel like I'm kind of that isolated person, think about maybe what you can do in this area to connect to family, friends, neighbors, whatnot, relationships. But the first one, prayer, being basically our relationship with God. And then the third one, the top one on the right, is rest, because we all need it. We work hard as Americans. We kind of have a culture that works hard, get things done, but we need to have joy and pleasure and delight in our life. We are not made to go through life, oh, I got to go to work, I got to go home, I got to go to work, I got to go home. That is not living well. I'm just going to say that's not living well. But work's important too, and that'll be the fourth quarter, whether we're paid to do the work or whether we're not paid to do the work. Most of my chores, I'd consider those, that's my work, you know. What I do here, stand up here, this is my work. I have to spend some time with it. So here's the questions, looking at those 4 areas, and they have little dots in the boxes you can see, is asking ourselves, how do I spend time with God and in prayer and in the Word? How do I do that? How often do I do it? This is a place where you can write goals down. You can say, all right, because this is what we're shooting for, right? We're shooting for a target. We might not, we're aiming for a target, and the aim is what's important. I don't think I've ever been successful in all my targets in any one year. I would say I definitely have not. But I still want to set a target out there. So our target might be, well, I want to make sure I spend 15 minutes a day with God. Or this year, I might want to read through the New Testament this year. Maybe you're like, you already do that well, and you're like, well, I want to read through the whole Bible this year. Or there could be a lot of other things in that area. I want to spend more time in silence. I want to take a class that will promote my love of God and help me connect to God. There's lots of things that you could do. But it's all about turning your attention to God. And whether you do that in a group or privately, you have options there. This is not a legalistic thing. I don't have to tell you which box to put something in. But the idea might be something like that. Like you're trying to shoot for something to live better, live well. The relationships, it might be like, well, maybe I'll take a meal to a friend once a month. Or I'll call my sister who I never see once every 2 weeks. You can write down specific things because what you're looking for is I'd like to have a goal. I'd like to shoot at something that will help me live better in my relationships with so-and-so. I find that sometimes I have a daughter who lives in Montana. I have 3 daughters, but I have a daughter who lives in Montana, and I find sometimes I'm like, gosh, I haven't talked to her for a while. I need to call her. Sometimes she works a lot, so, I kind of get sidetracked. This is something that can bring me a little closer. Oh, yeah, I want to be more in contact with my children. Make sure that I'm, even if I can't see them regularly, I want to talk to them on the phone. It's something I can write down. And you don't have to use this, but it's something that you can use. What things give you rest? What things create pleasure, delight for you? I know if I was Heidi, she'd be like, I run. She's a runner. It gives her a lot of pleasure, a lot of delight. I don't run. I'm never going to be a runner. I don't want to be a runner. It's not going to be on my list. But there are other things that I do like to do. I'm kind of a fan of mystery novels. I like to read. And so maybe I might put in something like, maybe I'll read a book every 2 weeks or every month or something. Things that create a space for me for pleasure and delight, so that I don't feel like I'm doing the work thing all the time or whatever. There could be lots of things. Anything. Crafting sometimes is in that area, like doing crafts and stuff. It just creates delight, and you accomplish something sometimes, and so it hits you on multiple levels. And then your work, paid and unpaid. And he has a little word here called calling. And I remember before Jamie and Heidi, and I've been here a long time, it was Pastor Dan and Patty. And Dan always used to say, what would you do if you didn't have to earn money? What would you do with your life if you didn't have to ever worry about money? And I thought it was a great question, and I thought I would ask it here because, a lot of us get paid. I'm a staff member here at the church. I get paid for that job. A lot of you have your job or your work might be students right now, and some of you are retired, and so your work becomes more maybe unpaid, but there's still things that you might consider like jobs that you do, things that you do to be a part of your life, even so. But wherever your work is, that's a good question to ask. If I wasn't doing this, if I could live my life, maybe that's a big target in life. It's not going to accomplish this year, but it's basically the idea that how could I get to the place where I didn't have to worry about money so I could do whatever I wanted to do and fulfill my calling? I've heard a lot of people say, well, I can't really abide in my calling because I have to, I have to pay the bills. And my calling is to do this. Well, that's not a question I'm going to answer here today, but I do think that it's a good question to ask us when we're kind of reviewing, looking forward, and asking ourselves, what does my dash look like right now? What does that dash look like? I was born in a certain year. I have this line, and on my tombstone, there's going to be a line, and there's going to be another date. But what's that dash going to look like? Is it what I want it to look like? those are the three things that for me, I'm just saying, they've been super helpful. And just the last things I want to say about it is, one, this isn't about, it really is not about succeeding and failing. I don't want to make it sound like that at all. It's not about like, oh, look, I'm successful in all these areas and I failed in these areas. It's really about living to a place that God wants me to live. All these things for me are things that I use in conjunction with my relationship with God. And God sometimes has other things to say than what maybe I would write down. But I believe the one thing that we all have in common, our list would look much different from person to person, but I think one thing that we all have in common is we want to matter. We want to matter to someone, to something. We want to make an impact. We want to mean something, because that's what breathes life into a lot of us. And it's not that we need our 5 minutes of fame. It's not that we need to be important, but we want to matter. And so we want to live well. We want to make an impact. And and if these tools do not appeal to you at all, because you're not that kind of person, that's totally okay. And I just felt like for some of us, sometimes we need tools. We need tools in our bucket to be able to do what we want to do. So my question, as I close up here, as you move forward into 2024, is what will I do to run the race that God has set before me? What will I do? And how will I be disciplined? How will I be the athlete in the race of life? How will I be disciplined? How will I have endurance? How will I be able to go in for the long haul? And I just want to leave you with that question. The worship team is going to come back up here, and they have one more song to sing. And I just want you to know that you guys are very loved here. Think of Jamie and Heidi as they return this week. And as we stand to sing together, then I just want to say, bless all of you in the new year. It's the one thing I can offer to all of you that is good and worthy, and it's to ask God to bless you in your life, in your relationships, in your work, in your love for God and your love for each other. And so stand together as we sing this. Thank you.